Marcus Thompson revved his Harley-Davidson as he pulled into the small coffee shop parking lot in downtown Los Angeles. The morning sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, and the familiar rumble of his motorcycle engine echoed off the nearby buildings. At 32 years old, Marcus had been riding for over a decade, and his bike was his pride and joy. The chrome gleamed under the California sunshine, and every piece of metal had been polished to perfection. He had always been particular about his motorcycle. It wasn't just transportation for him, it was a statement, a lifestyle, and sometimes, unfortunately, a way to intimidate others. Marcus worked as a construction supervisor, and his tough exterior often carried over into his personal life. He had a reputation in his neighborhood for being the guy you didn't want to mess with, and he liked it that way. As he dismounted his bike and began to remove his helmet, Marcus noticed something that immediately irritated him. A small, scruffy-looking dog was wandering around the parking lot, seemingly without an owner. The dog appeared to be some kind of mixed breed, with matted fur and a somewhat thin frame that suggested it might be a stray. What bothered Marcus most was that the dog was getting uncomfortably close to his precious motorcycle. The dog, whose name was actually Rex, had been waiting patiently outside the coffee shop for his owner to return. Rex was a loyal companion who had been rescued from a shelter 3 years earlier by a man who had seen something special in the abandoned animal. The dog had learned to wait quietly and patiently, never causing trouble or bothering anyone. But today something about the shiny chrome of the motorcycle had caught his attention, and his curiosity had gotten the better of him. Marcus watched with growing annoyance as the dog sniffed around the base of his motorcycle. In his mind, this was completely unacceptable. He had spent hours cleaning and maintaining his bike, and the last thing he wanted was some dirty stray dog potentially scratching the paint or leaving marks on the chrome. His temper, which had always been quick to flare, began to rise. "Get away from there," Marcus shouted at the dog, his voice harsh and commanding. But Rex, who was focused on investigating an interesting scent near the motorcycle's rear tire, didn't immediately respond to the aggressive tone. The dog wasn't being defiant or disobedient. He simply hadn't registered that the angry voice was directed at him. This perceived disobedience only made Marcus angrier. In his experience, when he told someone or something to do something, they did it immediately. He was used to being in charge at work sites, where his word was law, and he expected the same level of immediate compliance from everything around him, including stray animals. Without thinking about the consequences of his actions, Marcus took several quick steps toward the dog. His heavy boots made loud sounds on the asphalt, and his face was twisted with anger. Rex, finally sensing the approaching threat, looked up with confusion and mild concern. The dog had never been aggressive toward humans and had no understanding of why this large, angry man was approaching him so menacingly. What happened next would change both of their lives forever. Marcus, consumed by his rage and sense of ownership over his space, drew back his right leg and delivered a swift, hard kick directly to Rex's side. The impact sent the small dog tumbling several feet across the parking lot, where he landed with a painful yelp that echoed off the surrounding buildings. Rex immediately curled up into a defensive position, whimpering softly and clearly in pain. The kick had been delivered with significant force, and though the dog was tough from his earlier life on the streets, this level of unprovoked violence was something he had rarely experienced. He looked up at Marcus with confused, hurt eyes, unable to understand what he had done to deserve such treatment. Marcus felt a momentary satisfaction as he watched the dog retreat. In his mind, he had successfully defended his property and established his dominance. He dusted off his hands and began walking toward the coffee shop entrance, already putting the incident out of his mind. To him, it was just another minor inconvenience that he had handled in his typical direct manner. But as Marcus reached for the coffee shop door handle, he became aware that several people in the parking lot had witnessed what had just happened. A woman getting out of her car was staring at him with obvious shock and disgust. An elderly man walking his own dog had stopped in his tracks and was shaking his head disapprovingly. Even some people inside the coffee shop had seen the incident through the large front windows and were pointing in his direction. The woman who had witnessed the kick approached Marcus with fire in her eyes. "How could you do that to an innocent animal?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "That dog wasn't bothering anyone. You're a monster." Marcus felt his defenses rise immediately. He wasn't used to being confronted or criticized for his actions, and his first instinct was to justify what he had done. "That mutt was messing with my bike," he replied gruffly. "I worked hard for that machine, and I'm not going to let some stray dog damage it." The woman looked at him with complete disbelief. "Damage it? The dog was just smelling around. You could have seriously injured him. Someone should call the police." She pulled out her cell phone and began dialing, while continuing to glare at Marcus with obvious contempt. Marcus realized that the situation was escalating beyond what he had intended. Other people in the area were now openly staring at him and talking among themselves. He could hear fragments of their conversations, and it was clear that public opinion was strongly against him. Words like cruel and heartless drifted across the parking lot, and Marcus began to feel uncomfortable with the level of attention he was receiving. Inside the coffee shop, a man had been sitting quietly at a corner table, reading a newspaper and enjoying his morning coffee. He was dressed casually in jeans and a simple black t-shirt, with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Most people wouldn't have recognized him immediately, but this was Jason Statham, the famous action movie star. He had been trying to enjoy a rare quiet moment away from the spotlight when the commotion outside caught his attention. Jason Statham had been enjoying the peaceful morning atmosphere of the small coffee shop when the sound of a dog's painful yelp cut through the air like a knife. His head snapped up from his newspaper, and through the large front window, he saw a scene that made his blood boil. A large man in leather motorcycle gear had just kicked a small dog, and the animal was now cowering on the asphalt, clearly injured and frightened. What the biker didn't know was that the dog he had just attacked was Rex, Jason's beloved companion for the past 3 years. Jason had rescued Rex from a high kill shelter in downtown Los Angeles, where the dog had been scheduled for euthanasia due to overcrowding. From the moment Jason had seen Rex's hopeful eyes looking up at him through the cage bars, he knew they were meant to be together. Rex had become much more than just a pet to Jason. He was family. The dog had been Jason's constant companion through long filming schedules, promotional tours, and the general chaos that came with being a Hollywood action star. Rex provided a sense of normalcy and unconditional love that was rare in Jason's high-pressure world. The dog had his own bed in Jason's trailer on movie sets, his own seat in Jason's private jet, and had even appeared in a few behind-the-scenes footage shots that fans loved. Jason's hands trembled with rage as he watched Rex struggling to get back on his feet. The dog was clearly in pain, favoring his right side where the boot had made contact. But what made Jason even angrier was seeing Rex's confused expression as he looked around, trying to understand what he had done wrong. Rex had never shown aggression toward any human being, and his gentle nature was one of the things Jason loved most about him. Without hesitation, Jason bolted from his seat, leaving his coffee and newspaper behind. He pushed through the coffee shop door with such force that it slammed against the wall, causing everyone in the parking lot to turn in his direction. But Jason's attention was focused entirely on his injured companion. "Rex, come here, boy," Jason called out, his voice mixing concern with barely controlled fury. The dog's ears perked up at the familiar voice, and despite his pain, Rex's tail began to wag weakly. He limped toward his owner, whimpering softly with each step. Jason knelt down and gently gathered Rex into his arms, carefully examining the dog's injuries. Rex nuzzled against Jason's chest, seeking comfort and security. Jason could feel the dog trembling, whether from pain, fear, or both. His trained hands, which had performed countless action sequences and fight scenes, now moved with infinite gentleness as he checked Rex's ribs and legs for serious damage. Marcus, who had been arguing with the woman who had witnessed the incident, suddenly found himself face to face with an extremely angry man he didn't recognize. The newcomer was holding the dog Marcus had just kicked, and the intensity in his eyes was unlike anything Marcus had ever encountered. There was something dangerous about this man's controlled fury that made Marcus take an instinctive step backward. Did "You kick my dog?" Jason asked, his voice low and deadly calm. Every word was measured and precise, but there was no mistaking the threat underlying the question. Jason's accent, crisp and unmistakably British, added an edge to his words that made them even more intimidating. Marcus, still unaware of who he was dealing with, felt his own anger rising again. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by some random stranger. "Your dog was bothering my bike," he replied defiantly. "Maybe you should keep better control of your animal." The crowd that had gathered around them grew larger, and several people began recognizing Jason despite his casual clothing and baseball cap. Whispers of, "Is that Jason Statham?" and, "Oh my God, it's really him," began circulating through the group. Cell phones appeared as people started recording the confrontation, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Jason's jaw tightened as he processed Marcus's callous response. In all his years of playing tough guys and action heroes, on screen, he had never felt real fury like what was coursing through his veins at that moment. Rex was not just some random dog. He was Jason's family, his loyal companion, his best friend. The casual way Marcus dismissed what he had done was unforgivable. "Bothering your bike?" Jason repeated, his voice growing more dangerous with each word. "He's a 15-pound dog. What exactly did you think he was going to do to your precious motorcycle?" Marcus shrugged dismissively, still not grasping the gravity of the situation he had created. "I don't care what he weighs. He had no business being near my property. I worked hard for that bike, and I'm not going to let some mutt mess it up." The word mutt was the final straw for Jason. Rex was many things: a survivor, a loyal friend, a gentle soul, but he was nobody's mutt. Jason carefully placed Rex on the ground behind him, making sure the dog was safe and out of harm's way. Then he stood to his full height and looked Marcus directly in the eyes. "Let me explain something to you," Jason said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his authority and barely contained rage. "That mutt is worth more than you, your bike, and everything else you own combined. He's saved more lives than you ever will, brought more joy into this world than you're capable of, and shown more loyalty and honor than you could understand." Marcus was beginning to realize that this situation was spiraling beyond his control, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Look, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to mind your own business. What I do with stray dogs in a public parking lot is my concern." "Stray dogs?" Jason's voice rose for the first time, and the crowd around them instinctively took a step back. "This is Rex. He's been my companion for 3 years. He's traveled with me around the world, been featured in magazines, and has his own Instagram account with 2 million followers. And you just kicked him because you were worried about your motorcycle getting a nose print on it." The recognition was starting to dawn on Marcus, though he still couldn't quite believe it. The crowd around them was growing more excited, with people clearly recognizing the famous actor. Camera phones were recording every word, and Marcus began to realize that this incident was going to be much bigger than he had initially thought. Jason continued, his voice now carrying the weight of his fame and influence. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? You've assaulted a celebrity dog in front of dozens of witnesses, all of whom are recording this conversation. Rex has been in movies, commercials, and charity campaigns. He's probably more famous than you'll ever be." Marcus felt the first real stirring of panic in his chest. The implications of Jason's words were starting to sink in, and he was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about a random dog and an angry owner. This was about a celebrity's beloved pet, and there were cameras recording everything. The realization hit Marcus like a freight train, as more people in the crowd began whispering Jason Statham's name and pointing at him with their phones. Marcus finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. This wasn't just any dog owner he was dealing with. This was one of Hollywood's biggest action stars, and he had just kicked the man's beloved pet in front of dozens of witnesses. Jason's reputation in Hollywood wasn't just built on his movie roles. He was known throughout the industry as someone who was fiercely protective of the people and animals he cared about. Stories circulated among cast and crew members about how Jason would go to extraordinary lengths to ensure everyone's safety and well-being on his film sets. His loyalty was legendary, and so was his ability to hold grudges against those who crossed him or hurt the people he loved. I didn't know, Marcus stammered. His earlier bravado completely evaporated. The color had drained from his face as he began to comprehend the potential consequences of his actions. I mean, how was I supposed to know whose dog it was? Jason's eyes narrowed dangerously. Does it matter whose dog it was? Would it have been acceptable to kick any dog just because you were worried about your motorcycle? What kind of person does that make you? The crowd around them had grown to nearly 50 people, and the atmosphere was electric with tension. Many of them were filming the confrontation on their phones, and Jason knew that by the end of the day, this incident would be all over social media and entertainment news websites. The story of a biker kicking Jason Statham's dog was exactly the kind of content that would go viral instantly. Marcus tried desperately to salvage the situation. Look, Mr. Statham, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean any harm. Maybe we can just forget this whole thing happened? His voice was pleading now, and sweat was beginning to form on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Jason looked down at Rex, who was still favoring his injured side, but trying to stay close to his owner's legs. The dog's trusting eyes looked up at Jason, and it broke his heart to see the confusion and pain there. Rex had never done anything to deserve the treatment he had received, and Jason was determined to make sure Marcus understood the gravity of his actions. Forget it happened? Jason repeated, his voice incredulous. My dog is injured because of your unprovoked violence, and you want me to just forget it happened? Do you have any idea how this works? A woman in the crowd shouted out, Call the police, that's animal cruelty. Several other voices joined in, expressing their outrage at what they had witnessed. The mob mentality was beginning to turn against Marcus, and he could feel the hostility radiating from everyone around him. Jason pulled out his phone and began dialing. I'm calling my veterinarian first to make sure Rex is okay, and then I'm calling the police to report this assault. After that, my publicist is going to make sure every media outlet in Los Angeles knows exactly what kind of person you are. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. Wait, please, can't we work something out? I'll pay for any vet bills, I'll do whatever you want, just please don't make this public. Jason paused in his dialing and looked at Marcus with disgust. Now, you want to make things right? Where was this concern when you were kicking an innocent animal? You had every opportunity to walk away, to use your words instead of your boots, but you chose violence against a defenseless creature. The veterinarian answered Jason's call, and he quickly explained the situation. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been Rex's vet since Jason first adopted him, and she knew how much the dog meant to her famous client. She immediately agreed to see Rex within the hour, and suggested that Jason bring him in right away to check for internal injuries. As Jason finished his call, a police car pulled into the parking lot. Someone in the crowd had already called 911 to report the animal cruelty incident. Officers Patricia Williams and David Chen stepped out of their patrol car and immediately recognized that they were walking into a situation involving a major celebrity. Officer Williams approached Jason first. Mr. Statham, we received a call about an animal cruelty incident. Can you tell us what happened here? Jason calmly explained the situation while Rex sat quietly at his feet. His account was straightforward and factual, without any embellishment or dramatic flair. He simply described how he had witnessed Marcus kick his dog unprovoked, and how Rex had been injured as a result. Officer Chen then turned to Marcus, who was visibly sweating and nervous. Sir, is this account accurate? Did you kick this man's dog? Marcus looked around at the crowd of hostile faces, all of them recording his every word and movement. He realized that lying would only make things worse, especially with so many witnesses present. Yes, but I didn't know it was his dog. I thought it was a stray that was bothering my motorcycle. And you thought that justified kicking the animal? Officer Williams asked, her tone clearly disapproving. Marcus stammered, I just wanted it to get away from my bike. I didn't think it would be such a big deal. Officer Chen shook his head. Animal cruelty is always a big deal, sir. It doesn't matter if the animal belongs to a celebrity or to someone else. Kicking a dog is illegal in California, Regardless of the circumstances, Jason stepped forward. "Officers, I want to press full charges. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or an accident. This was a deliberate act of violence against an innocent animal, and I want to make sure it's handled appropriately." The implications of Jason's words weren't lost on anyone present. When a celebrity of his stature pressed charges, it became a media circus. Marcus's face would be plastered across newspapers, websites, and television screens as the man who kicked Jason Statham's dog. His life was about to change dramatically, and not for the better. Officer Williams began reading Marcus his rights while Officer Chen started taking statements from witnesses. The crowd was eager to provide their accounts of what they had seen, and every single witness confirmed Jason's version of events. Several people offered to share their video recordings with the police as evidence. Marcus was handcuffed and placed in the back of the patrol car while the officers completed their investigation. Through the car window, he could see Jason gently picking up Rex and carrying him toward a waiting luxury SUV. The contrast was stark. The gentle way Jason handled his injured pet versus the violent way Marcus had treated the same animal just minutes earlier. As the police car pulled away with Marcus in custody, Jason realized that this was just the beginning. Within hours, the story would be everywhere, and Marcus's life would become a cautionary tale about the consequences of cruelty and the importance of treating all living creatures with respect and kindness. By the time Jason arrived at Dr. Martinez's veterinary clinic with Rex, the first social media posts about the incident were already beginning to circulate. The videos captured by witnesses showed the confrontation from multiple angles, and the #SoccerJusticeForRex was starting to trend on Twitter. Jason's publicist, Amanda Reynolds, had already called him 3 times during the short drive to the vet's office. Dr. Martinez greeted them at the door, her face filled with concern as she saw Rex limping slightly. "Bring him straight back to exam room 2, she said, leading them through the hallway. "I've cleared my schedule for the next hour so we can do a thorough examination." As Dr. Martinez carefully examined Rex, checking his ribs, legs, and internal organs, Jason paced the small room anxiously. Despite all the dangerous stunts he had performed in his movies, nothing had ever made him feel as helpless as watching his beloved companion in pain. Rex bore the examination stoically, occasionally looking up at Jason for reassurance. "The good news is that there don't appear to be any broken bones," Dr. Martinez announced after completing her examination. "But he definitely has some bruising along his right side, and he's going to be sore for several days. I want to keep him here for a few hours for observation to make sure there are no internal injuries we might have missed." Jason felt a wave of relief wash over him, followed immediately by a surge of renewed anger at Marcus. Even though Rex's injuries weren't life-threatening, the fact remained that a grown man had violently attacked a defenseless animal for no legitimate reason. The vet's diagnosis confirmed that Rex had indeed been hurt, which would strengthen the case against Marcus. While Rex rested comfortably on a soft blanket in the observation room, Jason stepped outside to call Amanda back. His publicist had been handling crisis management for A-list celebrities for over 15 years, and she had never sounded more excited about a potential media story. "Jason, this is huge," Amanda said the moment she answered the phone. "The videos are everywhere already, and the public response is overwhelming. Everyone is on your side, and this Marcus Thompson guy is being absolutely destroyed on social media. His employer has already fired him, and people are calling for boycotts of any business that associates with him." Jason listened with mixed feelings as Amanda described the rapidly escalating consequences for Marcus. Part of him felt satisfied that there would be real repercussions for the man's cruel actions, but another part of him wondered if the punishment was becoming disproportionate to the crime. "What exactly is happening to him?" Jason asked. Amanda's voice was animated as she rattled off the developments. "Well, his construction company fired him about an hour ago after the videos started going viral. Apparently they received hundreds of calls from angry customers threatening to cancel contracts if they kept him employed. His apartment complex is trying to evict him because his lease has a clause about criminal behavior that reflects poorly on the property. And someone doxed him online, so he's getting thousands of hate messages on every social media platform. Jason frowned as he absorbed this information. While he wanted Marcus to face consequences for his actions, he hadn't intended for the man's entire life to be destroyed. Amanda, make sure your contacts in the media focus on the animal cruelty aspect and the importance of treating animals with kindness. I don't want this to become a witch hunt. But Amanda was already 3 steps ahead, thinking about how to maximize the positive publicity for Jason while maintaining public interest in the story. This is perfect for your image, Jason. You're already seen as a tough guy who stands up for what's right, and now you're also the loving pet owner who protects innocent animals. We should definitely set up some interviews with animal rights organizations. After ending the call with Amanda, Jason returned to check on Rex. The dog was sleeping peacefully, and his breathing appeared normal and steady. Dr. Martinez assured Jason that Rex would make a full recovery, but recommended keeping him quiet for the next few days to allow the bruising to heal. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus was experiencing the worst day of his life. He had been released from jail after posting bail, but returning to his normal life proved impossible. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications from social media platforms, news outlets, and unknown numbers. The messages ranged from death threats to demands that he apologize publicly to offers from lawyers wanting to represent him. Marcus's construction supervisor, Dave Rodriguez, had called him personally to deliver the news about his termination. "Look, Marcus, I've known you for 8 years and I never thought you were the kind of guy who would hurt an animal," Dave said. "But the company can't be associated with this kind of publicity. We're getting calls from clients threatening to cancel million-dollar contracts because of what you did." The reality of his situation was beginning to sink in for Marcus. He had lost his job, his reputation was destroyed, and his face was being broadcast on news stations across the country as an example of animal cruelty. The incident that had lasted less than 5 minutes was going to impact the rest of his life. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had always been friendly toward him, crossed the street to avoid walking past his apartment. When he went to the grocery store, other customers recognized him from the viral videos and began pointing and whispering. The checkout clerk looked at him with obvious disgust and refused to make eye contact during the transaction. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment watching the news coverage of his own actions. The footage of him kicking Rex was played repeatedly, followed by interviews with animal rights activists who used his behavior as an example of the kind of cruelty they fought against daily. One activist, Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the Los Angeles Animal Protection League, spoke passionately about the case. "What we saw in that parking lot represents the worst of human behavior," Dr. Walsh said to the news anchor. A small innocent dog was violently attacked by a man who felt entitled to use physical force simply because he was annoyed. This is exactly the kind of mindset that leads to animal abuse, domestic violence, and other forms of cruelty. Marcus winced as he watched himself on television. Seeing his actions from an outside perspective, he was beginning to understand why so many people were outraged. Rex had clearly posed no threat to anyone or anything, and Marcus's response had been completely disproportionate to the situation. His phone rang, and he saw his mother's number on the caller ID. Marcus hesitated before answering, knowing that the conversation would be difficult. "Marcus, honey, I just saw the news," his mother said, her voice filled with disappointment and concern. "Please tell me this isn't real. Please tell me you didn't really kick that poor little dog." Marcus closed his eyes and leaned back against his couch. "Mom, I can explain. It wasn't as bad as it looks on the video. I was just trying to get the dog away from my motorcycle." "By kicking it?" His mother's voice rose with disbelief. "Marcus, I raised you better than that. Your father and I taught you to be kind to animals and to treat all living creatures with respect. How could you do something like this?" The disappointment in his mother's voice was harder to bear than all the hate messages from strangers. Marcus realized that his actions hadn't just damaged his own life. They had hurt and embarrassed the people who loved him most. 3 days after the incident, Marcus found himself sitting in a small, cramped office across from Public Defender Lisa Chen. The legal system was moving quickly, and the district attorney's office was treating the case seriously due to the high-profile nature of the victim and the clear video evidence of the crime. California's animal cruelty laws carried significant penalties, including potential jail time and mandatory counseling. Mr. Thompson, I have to be honest with you, Lisa said, reviewing the case file. This is not going to be easy to defend. We have multiple video recordings from different angles, dozens of witnesses, and a celebrity victim whose dog was clearly injured. The prosecution is going to push for the maximum penalty to make an example out of you. Marcus slumped in his chair, feeling the weight of his situation pressing down on him. What kind of penalty are we talking about? Lisa flipped through several pages of legal documents. Animal cruelty in California is a misdemeanor that can carry up to 1 year in county jail and a fine of up to $20,000. Given the publicity around this case and the fact that Mr. Statham is pressing full charges, I expect they'll ask for the maximum sentence. The financial implications alone were staggering for Marcus, who had already lost his job and was facing mounting legal bills. But beyond the legal consequences, his life had become unlivable. Everywhere he went, people recognized him as the guy who kicked Jason Statham's dog. His landlord had served him with an eviction notice, claiming that his notoriety was disturbing other tenants and damaging the property's reputation. Meanwhile, Jason was dealing with his own complicated feelings about the incident's aftermath. Rex had recovered well from his injuries and was back to his normal, playful self. But Jason couldn't help feeling somewhat responsible for the destruction of Marcus's life, even though he knew the man had brought it upon himself. During an interview with Entertainment Tonight, Jason was asked about his feelings regarding the massive public backlash against Marcus. Look, what he did was wrong, and there should be consequences for animal cruelty, Jason said thoughtfully, but I never intended for his entire life to be destroyed. I just wanted justice for Rex and to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen to other animals. The interviewer pressed further. Do you think the public response has been proportionate to his actions? Jason paused, choosing his words carefully. I think social media can sometimes amplify situations beyond what anyone expects. My main concern was always Rex's welfare and making sure this man understood that his actions were unacceptable. If people are responding so strongly, it's because they care about animal welfare, which I think is a positive thing. But privately, Jason was beginning to have doubts about the direction the story had taken. His assistant had shown him some of the more extreme social media posts about Marcus, including people who had found his home address and were calling for vigilante justice. That level of harassment went far beyond anything Jason had wanted or expected. Marcus, meanwhile, was discovering depths of isolation he had never imagined possible. His few friends had distanced themselves from him, not wanting to be associated with his notorious reputation. His favorite restaurants and bars were no longer comfortable places to visit, as other patrons would recognize him and make their displeasure known. Even simple errands like grocery shopping had become exercises in enduring public humiliation. One evening, as Marcus sat alone in his apartment eating a microwave dinner, he received an unexpected phone call. The number was blocked, but something compelled him to answer. Marcus Thompson? The voice was familiar, though Marcus couldn't immediately place it. Yes, who is this? This is Jason Statham. I think we need to talk. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. Mr. Statham, I don't understand. Why are you calling me? Jason's voice was calm but serious. Because this situation has gotten out of hand and I think we both know it. I want to meet with you tomorrow morning. There's a diner called Mel's on Sunset Boulevard. 10 a.m. Come, alone. Before Marcus could respond, Jason had hung up. Marcus stared at his phone, wondering if the call had really happened or if the stress of the past few days was causing him to hallucinate. But the call log showed a blocked number at the exact time he remembered answering. That night, Marcus barely slept. He couldn't imagine what Jason wanted to discuss with him. Was this some kind of trap? Was Jason planning to confront him again, perhaps with cameras rolling for maximum publicity? Or was there something else entirely that the famous actor had in mind? The next morning, Marcus arrived at Mel's Diner 15 minutes early. He chose a booth in the back corner where he would be less likely to be recognized by other patrons. His hands shook slightly as he ordered coffee and waited for Jason to arrive. At exactly 10 a.m., Jason walked through the door. He was dressed, casually in jeans and a dark sweater, with sunglasses that he removed as he spotted Marcus in the corner booth. Rex was with him, walking calmly on a leash and showing no signs of lingering injury from the incident. Jason slid into the booth, across from Marcus, and Rex settled down beside his owner's feet. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either man. The victim of Marcus's violence was now sitting just inches away from him, calm and trusting. "Thank you for coming," Jason said, his voice neutral, but not hostile. Marcus couldn't take his eyes off Rex. Seeing the dog up close and healthy made him feel a complicated mix of relief and renewed shame. "Mr. Statham, I want you to know how sorry I am about what happened. I know that probably doesn't mean much now, but I need you to know that I regret my actions completely." Jason studied Marcus's face, looking for signs of sincerity. "Tell me something, Marcus. Do you regret what you did because you got caught and faced consequences, or do you regret it because you realize it was wrong?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus had been asked similar questions by reporters, lawyers, and even his own family, but somehow Jason's direct inquiry demanded a more honest answer than he had given before. "Both," Marcus admitted. "At first, I was just angry about getting caught and having my life turned upside down. But seeing all the footage, reading what people were saying, and especially talking to my mother, I started to understand that what I did was genuinely cruel and unnecessary. Rex didn't deserve that, and I had no right to hurt him just because I was annoyed." Jason nodded slowly, appreciating the honesty in Marcus's response. "The reason I called you is because I've been watching what's happened to your life over the past few days, and I'm not comfortable with it. Don't get me wrong, you deserved consequences for what you did. But death threats and having your entire existence destroyed over a 30-second incident seems excessive." Marcus felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I believe in second chances, but only for people who genuinely want to change," Jason replied. "I've been thinking about this a lot, and I want to propose something. It's unconventional, and it's going to require you to swallow your pride and commit to some serious personal growth." Jason pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a document he had prepared. "I've spoken with my lawyer and the prosecutor's office. If you're willing to plead guilty to the animal cruelty charge, accept responsibility publicly, and complete 200 hours of community service at animal shelters, I'm prepared to ask the judge for leniency in your sentencing." Marcus read through the proposal with growing amazement. Jason was essentially offering him a way out of the worst consequences of his actions, but the requirements were significant. The community service alone would take months to complete, and the public apology would be humiliating but necessary. "There's more," Jason continued. "I want you to work with Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the Animal Protection League to develop an education program about animal cruelty. You'd speak at schools, community centers, anywhere people need to hear about the consequences of violence toward animals. Your story would become a teaching tool." The proposal was both generous and demanding. Jason was offering Marcus a path toward redemption, but it would require him to confront his actions repeatedly and use his notoriety for positive change rather than simply trying to escape from it. Marcus looked down at Rex, who was resting peacefully at Jason's feet. "Why would you do this for me? After what I did to your dog, why would you help me?" Jason reached down and gently scratched behind Rex's ears. "Because Rex is okay, and because destroying your life completely doesn't accomplish anything positive. If you're genuinely remorseful and willing to change, then maybe some good can come out of this situation. But if you're just looking for an easy way out, then forget I made this offer." 6 months later, Marcus stood in front of a packed auditorium at Lincoln Elementary School, facing 200 eager third graders who were participating in the school's annual Kindness Week program. His hands no longer shook when he spoke publicly about his mistakes, and his message had been refined through dozens of similar presentations across Los Angeles. "How many of you have pets at home?" Marcus asked the audience, and nearly half the children raised their hands enthusiastically. "I want you to think about how much you love your pets, and how you would feel if someone hurt them just because they were having a bad day." The transformation in Marcus had been remarkable, though not without challenges. The first month of his community service at the West LA Animal Shelter had been difficult. Many of the volunteers and staff members had recognized him from the viral videos and treated him with suspicion and hostility. But gradually, as they watched him clean kennels, feed abandoned animals, and genuinely care for creatures that had been neglected or abused, attitudes began to shift. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had initially been skeptical of Jason's rehabilitation proposal, had become one of Marcus's strongest advocates. "I've worked with hundreds of volunteers over the years," she told a local news reporter. "Marcus Thompson has shown more dedication and growth than almost anyone I've ever supervised. His transformation seems genuine and lasting." The education program that Marcus and Dr. Walsh had developed together was being implemented in schools throughout California. Marcus would tell his story honestly, explaining how his anger and sense of entitlement had led him to hurt an innocent animal, and then discuss the consequences of his actions. But more importantly, he would talk about empathy, responsibility, and the importance of treating all living beings with respect. Rex had become an unexpected partner in these presentations. Jason had agreed to let his beloved dog participate in selected school visits, where Rex would demonstrate basic obedience and allow children to pet him gently. The contrast between Rex's calm, forgiving nature and Marcus's former aggression created powerful teaching moments about forgiveness and second chances. During one particularly memorable presentation at Roosevelt High School, a student asked Marcus directly, "Do you think you deserve forgiveness for what you did?" Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "I think forgiveness is something that has to be earned through actions, not just words. I can't undo what I did to Rex, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure other animals don't suffer because of human cruelty and ignorance. Whether I deserve forgiveness isn't really for me to decide." The legal proceedings had concluded 3 months earlier, with Marcus pleading guilty to animal cruelty charges. As Jason had promised, the judge had shown leniency, sentencing Marcus to 1 year of probation, a $5,000 fine, and 300 hours of community service. The additional 100 hours beyond Jason's original proposal had been Marcus's own idea, reflecting his commitment to making amends for his actions. Jason had attended the sentencing hearing, bringing Rex with him. When the judge asked if Jason wanted to make a victim impact statement, he had spoken about the importance of balancing justice with compassion. Rex recovered from his physical injuries quickly, Jason told the court, but the real injury was to the trust and safety that all animals should feel around humans. Mr. Thompson's continued work with animal welfare organizations is helping to repair that broader damage. The media attention around Marcus had gradually shifted from purely negative to more nuanced coverage of his rehabilitation efforts. While some people remained skeptical of his transformation, many others began to see his story as an example of how people could change and grow from their worst moments. Marcus's personal life had also begun to stabilize. He had found work with a small construction company whose owner, Maria Santos, was willing to give him a second chance. "Everyone deserves an opportunity to prove they've learned from their mistakes," Maria had told him during the interview. "But I expect you to work twice as hard as anyone else to prove yourself." His relationship with his family had slowly healed as well. His mother, who had been devastated by the initial incident, was now proud of the work her son was doing to educate others about animal welfare. "The Marcus I raised is finally showing himself again," she had told a local newspaper. "I'm proud of the man he's becoming." Perhaps most surprisingly, Marcus and Jason had developed an unlikely friendship. They met for coffee once a month to discuss the education program and to check on each other's well-being. Jason had been impressed by Marcus's genuine commitment to change, while Marcus was grateful for the opportunity to prove that he could be better than his worst moment. During one of their recent meetings, Jason had made an unexpected proposal. "I'm producing a documentary about animal welfare and second chances," he told Marcus. "I'd like you to be one of the featured subjects, telling your complete story from the incident through your rehabilitation." Marcus had been hesitant at first, worried about reopening old wounds and potentially facing renewed public scrutiny. But ultimately, he had agreed, seeing it as another opportunity to help educate people about the consequences of cruelty and the possibility of redemption. The documentary, titled "Second Chances: A Story of Redemption," would premiere the following year at the Sundance Film Festival. It would follow Marcus's journey from the parking lot incident through his community service work and educational presentations. More importantly, it would explore themes of accountability, forgiveness, and the capacity for human beings to learn and grow from their mistakes. Rex, now 4 years old and as beloved as ever, continued to be Jason's constant companion and had become something of an ambassador for animal welfare causes. His Instagram account, which had grown to over 5 million followers since the incident, regularly featured posts about rescue animals, responsible pet ownership, and the importance of treating all creatures with kindness. As Marcus finished his presentation to the elementary school students, a little girl in the front row raised her hand. "Mr. Marcus, do you and Rex like each other now?" Marcus smiled and looked over at Rex, who was sitting calmly beside the podium. "Rex is much more forgiving than I probably deserve," he answered honestly. "He's taught me a lot about giving people second chances, even when they've hurt you. I hope that someday I can be as good a person as Rex is a dog." The children laughed at this response, but Marcus meant every word. His journey from a moment of inexcusable cruelty to a life dedicated to preventing similar incidents had been difficult and humbling, but it had also been transformative. He had learned that true redemption required not just acknowledging past mistakes, but committing to a lifetime of making amends through positive actions. As the students filed out of the auditorium, many of them stopping to pet Rex gently under Jason's supervision, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a man whose anger and entitlement had led him to hurt an innocent creature. Today, he was someone who spent his time teaching others about compassion and responsibility. The road to redemption was long and ongoing, but Marcus had learned that the most important journey was not about reaching a final destination of forgiveness, but about choosing every day to be better than the person he had been the day before. And in that daily choice, he had found not just redemption, but a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for years.